We'll catch up on the comments in a little bit. Joining me now on the I Have No Sponsor hotline from SI.com, Ed Kracz. Good morning, Ed. How are you doing today?
Hey, good morning, Phil. How are you?
I'm doing better than the Phillies are doing. I know I have you here to talk Eagles, but, man, that was pretty pathetic yesterday. I saw you even tweeting about the Phillies yesterday.
Yeah, man, it was just became unwatchable. I had to click out for a few innings there, and I turned it back on, and they were still being no hit through 7 innings. So I watched it from there, and I saw them get 2 hits. I think they finished with, but just a terrible performance. You want to go into the weekend against the Braves with some momentum, and they had it. They had won 4 in a row, and then they just lost everything they had when they got whipped 10-0. That's not a good sign going into the weekend, if you ask me.
It's funny. I said that exact same thing on social media yesterday at the beginning of this show, that it was a momentum killer. And
yeah.
Eagles fans would never accept what went down yesterday. But Phillies fans seem to be like, it's okay. It's no big deal. They won a series. It's no big deal. It's a message. It's a momentum killer. It's a locker room killer, what went on yesterday. And it wouldn't be acceptable in the Eagles offices, in the Eagles locker room, or to the Eagles fans.
No, I absolutely agree. Baseball's a little different. You play every single day, 162 games. So, you get a chance to get right back at it today, and you hope to kind of, stem the bleeding a little bit. Football, you have to sit and wait for a week before you get a chance to do that. So there's plenty of more time to kind of diagnose what's going on during football season because you have a week. Baseball, you're right back at it the next day, and they still have that 5-game lead. And this is a huge series, and I guess it's encouraging. The Phillies have their top 4 pitchers lined up to face the Braves. But I think the Phillies need to win 3 out of 4 in this series to kind of say, okay, look, we're going to win this division and send the Braves out of here down 7 games.
Yep. All right, so let's get to the Eagles. That's why you're here. Excuse me. Another fantastic training camp by you covering the team. I love the follow. I always not just saying it because you're on the show, but I always talk about you and a couple others, my favorite reporters that are there all the time. The vibes are rolling high right now as we're getting set we're just over a week from the first game of the season. The roster's been set. Most of the practice squad has been filled out now. I believe there's 14 of the 17 names locked to the practice squad. What were your biggest thoughts when the initial 53-man roster came out and then the first few names were signed to the practice squad yesterday?
Yeah, my initial thoughts were like, who's going to back up Cam Jurgens at center? To me, that was one of my storylines going into summer camp is it's important to identify the backup center because Cam's I think is going to be a really good player. He's going to make his own name in this game. He's not going to be Jason Kelce. And remember, Kelce started 156 straight games. He hasn't missed a start since the middle of 2014. So is Jurgens going to be that? That would, I don't think so. Not many people are that, that sort of Iron Man. But so you have to find out who's going to be your backup center. And a lot of people I know say Landon Dickerson can do it. The Eagles, they don't like to, if there's somebody that gets hurt, they don't like to mess with 2 spots. So you'd be messing with 2 spots if you move Dickerson to center and then had to find someone to play his spot at left guard. And Dickerson, he doesn't get many reps there. He hasn't taken any this summer. So who's going to be the backup to Cam Jurgens? I know we're kind of nitpicking here, but I'm concerned that something happened to Jurgens, and he did miss 4 games last year. Who's going to come in at center? And then, another thought I had was, tight ends. You're only keeping 2. Last year they kept 4. They've tried to replace Jack Stoll, and now they got him back to the practice squad, but they spent the summer trying to find that 3rd tight end. And I really liked what E.J. Jenkins did, and they were fortunate, I think, to get him back to the practice squad. But 2 tight ends was a little light. And then when you look at some of the other positions, they have 11 defensive backs, which seems a lot. And I think James Bradbury kind of messed that number up a little bit. They probably should only have 10 on this roster. But it was an incomplete roster when they put that 53 together. Like Howie Roseman said, in the short time after they sent that roster into the league, he said that we're incomplete and we have a lot of work to do. And, they added some guys to the practice squad that makes sense. So, we'll see where they go from here.
You mentioned James Bradbury. I want to get back to center in a second, and some of those other positions, but you mentioned James Bradbury. A lot of people wanted James Bradbury off this team, and I was never in that camp. I always kind of felt that, because of the contract, there's more value in keeping him at least to start the season than not. Do you think it was solely a contract reason why they kept him, or do you think he did show enough in training camp to warrant that last position there at safety or defensive back, whatever you want to call it?
Well, I think that, he's a proven veteran, and, that carries some weight in the organization, especially when you look at, some of the guys that are going to be playing in the secondary, guys like Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean, two rookies. And then you have Isaiah Rodgers, who hasn't played in over a year, obviously, because of the suspension. You have Keely Ringo, who's in his second year. So you're pretty young on that, in that secondary. So I think the fact that he's a proven veteran kind of added some value to keeping him. I know they tried to trade him also, but they're not just going to give him away because they like that veteran presence he brings. I mean, James is a good locker room guy. He's a very stand-up guy. He's good with his teammates. He's willing to help. And I think there's value in that as well. Young guys can kind of lean on him and pick his brain, even though he might not, have a starting role. He's played 9 years in this league. He's had a lot of experience. He's played in the Super Bowl. So that adds value to Bradbury. I'm not saying he's going to be here all year, but that I think pushed him over the top. It hasn't always been pretty in that transition to safety. He's still kind of learning it. So you don't want to have to see him kind of come in and play there right away. But he could even be a game day inactive, Phil, if he's still around when the Eagles go to Brazil next week. He may not even be active for the game because he doesn't play special teams. So, they're going to probably try to see if they can find a taker. But right now he brings value as far as his veteran leadership goes.
You were talking about the offense and tight ends and the backup center position a few moments ago. Were you kind of surprised when the roster came out, the initial roster, how defensive heavy they went as a whole? Yeah. I mean, what was it, 22 to 28 defense offense? I mean, because Howie Roseman is known as an offensive guy. He wants to attack the offense, have the best possible offense out there. I was kind of surprised just as a whole how little offense they kept versus defense. I know they went heavier on offense on the practice squad, but that's the practice squad, not the 53. Were you kind of shocked by how lopsided the numbers were there as a whole?
Yeah, that's a good point. 28 defense, 22 offense, and Howie Roseman isn't the only one that likes to play offense. Jeffrey Lurie loves offense, and he owns this team. You'll wonder how much of an influence Vic Fangio had, in that cut down room where they made their cuts and their decisions. You wonder how he influenced this roster, probably quite a bit. I mean, listen, the guys that they have on offense are, really good. Obviously, I'm a little concerned with the depth on the O-line. Not sure I'm really in love with that, but the Eagles have Jeff Stoutland, and he can wave his magic wand and turn lemonade into lemon, or lemons into lemonade, whatever the saying is. So you hope that he can kind of get these guys ready to play. I was a little surprised they didn't keep Brett Toth. He can play all 5 positions on that offensive line. Terrific versatility, but I guess the question is, how well can he play those 5 positions?
You mentioned him. Did I read a report that he was there yesterday at trying out, quote unquote, for the Eagles, which means basically maybe he's the 15th guy on the practice squad?
He could be added to the practice squad, yeah, and I would be surprised if he isn't. I mean, because again, who's going to be the backup center? Toth worked there the whole camp pretty much. Dylan McMahon obviously did, but I'm not sure Dylan McMahon's ready. He's a little light. He's still finding his way. I thought he did some good things, but there were times where he was invisible and didn't do enough. So, I'm not sure that they would be comfortable keeping him active against Green Bay, or elevating him from the practice squad, I should say. And if something were to happen to Juergens, you're throwing him out there against Kenny Clark. And I just don't think that's a good matchup in the Eagles' favor. You need a little more experience there. So, we'll see what McMahon can do, as he develops here on the practice squad. But yeah, defense, there's a lot of defensive guys. And I think like we talked about, 11 defensive backs is a lot. You're probably keeping 9 or 10 in a more of a perfect world. So that skews the numbers a little bit. And you look at the offenses, like who else would you have kept on the offense. Maybe he would have kept Anais Smith if he didn't come down with this injury. Maybe he would have been the sixth receiver. But they did get Paris Campbell back to the practice squad, so he's available to be elevated on game day if necessary. I don't know where else they would have gone. They kept three quarterbacks, which a lot of teams don't keep three quarterbacks. A lot keep two. They only kept three running backs, but they got Ty Davis Price back to the practice squad. Again, tight end, only two. That kind of messes up the numbers too. Like they usually keep three or four. So that messes up the numbers too. I think we'll see the numbers kind of come in a little more balance, once the season starts and, things start to happen and guys start to, figure out their roles and we'll see how they play. So I think that'll come down a little more in balance as we go forward here.
Do you think Howie's pretty much done though with the 53-man roster, or do you think there's still more, like we keep talking about backup center or tight end, all these different positions? James Bradbury might not even be here, the whole season. Do you think Howie's still, I know the waiver wire thing has been complete. They didn't, get any claims or anything like that. Do you think he's still trying to figure out and tinker with the actual 53-man roster and keeping his ear to the ground, maybe making some phone calls to kind of improve some of these positions?
Well, Howie always has his ear to the ground. Whenever there's somebody available, the Eagles are always mentioned as a possibility because Howie's always calling. He's always checking in. Listen, I don't foresee anything happening here in the near future, but, Howie's not going to stop listening and he's not going to stop making his calls. He's going to see if they can find, an upgrade, as incremental as it may be. He even said that if we can find an upgrade, no matter how incremental, they're going to do it. So I don't know what's out there or who's willing to part with a player at this stage of the game. I mean, usually you see these draft picks or trades and they're for draft picks. We saw Ernest Jones move from the Rams to the Titans. I thought that was a great deal for the Titans, having only give up a 5th round pick. So we've seen some low level quarterback moves. Malik Willis goes from the Titans to the Packers, but I'm not sure that we'll see anything here in the near future from Howie as far as the 53 goes.
So we've talked about some other positions, but another position, like you mentioned, Ernest Jones, and, everybody's concerned with the offensive line and different positions. I've been concerned this whole entire offseason with the depth on the defensive line, tackle and on the edge, losing Hassan Reddick, which turns out probably was for the better anyway. With what's going on there with him in New York. But, you've been there every day at practice. You've seen everybody at training camp. Are you concerned at all with the rotation and the depth on the defensive line, interior and on the outside?
I think when you look at, who they have on that defensive line, it's young. You look at the edge position, I'm not sure it's enough. They have there, they're really counting on a big season from Bryce Huff. They're hoping he can continue to ascend. He had the 10 sacks last year. They hope he can hit that again this year, if not more. But, I think Vic Fangio does a good job with his disguises of defense. I think he likes the versatility of some of these players. I think he can line Jalen Carter up on the outside if he wants to. He can line Milton Williams up on the outside. I like Thomas Booker as a defensive tackle, his 3rd year in the league. I mean, I think he does a really nice job with pushing the pocket from the interior, but he's another guy you can line up on the outside. We've seen Devin White, the linebacking core, Zach Bond and Jeremiah Trotter, they line up on the outside of the defensive line too, and they're kind of a designated pass rusher on certain plays. So I think the versatility and some of the disguises that Fangio is capable of giving offenses can help compensate for maybe some of those big names that I'm just not seeing on that defensive line. Obviously, Jalen Carter's a huge name, right, and Jordan Davis is a big name. But you don't have that Hassan Reddick, that guy that's going to give you 11 sacks, every year. So who's it going to be? But I think Fangio has enough. I mean, he's been doing this 40 years. He's got enough in his quote unquote toolbox to kind of give these offenses different looks, and you're not going to know where different guys are coming from play to play. Offenses are really going to have to prepare to play against the Vic Fangio defense. And I like some of the pieces he has to move around the chessboard to get guys in certain positions to create mismatches.
Yeah. I mean, talking about Hassan Reddick leaving, I've been concerned this whole camp, well, more so the preseason games, because I originally thought this was going to be the Nolan Smith breakout season. And there's two different theories. Either A, he's just trying to get snaps, and that's why he's playing so much in the preseason, or the other theory where, maybe he's just not good enough yet and he's still a work in progress. Do you think Nolan Smith can change that narrative about him here early in the season, get on the field, and maybe be that guy that kind of picks up some of the slack of, Hassan Reddick's, loss?
Well, again, I think the Eagles are kind of counting on it, but he is still a developing player. In his second year, he won't admit to it, but I think he had some surgery done with his shoulder in the offseason. He never makes excuses. He loves to play. He didn't care that he had to play 20 snaps or so against the Vikings in the preseason finale. I mean, that he just wants to play, and he certainly could use the reps. I mean, if you're a developing player who you're counting on, you want to get him out there as much as possible. I thought it was telling when Vic Fangio said during camp that he needs to get more physical at the point of attack. He really needs to, and that's what I like about Jalen Hunt, by the way. Not to get off track here, but man, that guy is so physical at the point of attack. He'll knock somebody backwards. Now, he might get stopped in his tracks after that initial punch. He still needs to get better with some of his repertoire of moves. But, if Nolan Smith had that kind of physicality, at the point of attack, then he would be a double-digit sack guy easily. So he needs to get better in that aspect. And I thought it was interesting Fangio pointed that out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just, I love the Jalen Hunt, name drop that you had there. I thought Jalen Hunt was going to be one of those guys that wasn't active on game day. For a while, I thought Jalen Hunt would be one of those guys that he was such a developmental project that he wouldn't be making any factor on this defense over the first season completely. But he's definitely proven his worth and proven that he's earned a right to be out there. And he does play the role in a Vic Fangio defense pretty well because he can also drop back into coverage. He can do a lot of different versatile things there. I think that's very interesting. I also think you mentioned some of the linebackers there. I forget which reporter put it out there yesterday, but somebody was there at practice yesterday putting out that even Nakobe Dean might be pushing for more playing time, even a starting role on this defense at the linebacker position. It's kind of crazy to see that one off season, the cornerback room, but also the linebacker room, the script has kind of flipped really, really quickly on the quality of players there.
Yeah, and that's just the beauty of the NFL in general. You don't have these. I mean, the Chiefs obviously have separated themselves a bit, but your fortunes can be turned around in a space of one off season. And I think we've seen that with the linebacker group. I like this linebacker group better than what the Eagles had last year. I mean, I think Devin White's better than Zach Cunningham. I thought Nick Morrow was he was an average player. I think he's in Buffalo. I think he made that roster. I'm not 100% sure, but I like Zach Bond. I like Nakobe Dean. I mean, he's just been healthy, and that was a key storyline to me coming into the training camp was, can he stay healthy? Because he's had this injury history. He came in as a rookie. He was healthy, but there were questions about, the shoulder. Maybe that's why he dropped in the draft. And then, of course, last year he ruined his foot, had to have surgery. But he was healthy all summer long. And if he can stay healthy, as much respect as I have for Vic Fangio and his 40 years of service to this game, if he doesn't play Nakobe Dean, he's crazy. I mean, he's got to get Dean on the field.
So who snaps are Nakobe Dean taking then? Is it Devin White? Is it Zach Bond?
I mean, it could be a rotation. Fangio said that he's done that in the past where he's rotated guys. I think Devin White stays on the field. I think he's going to be the green dot. He's going to wear that green dot communication signal in his helmet. But I think Bond just went out of my head there. Dean. I think Bond and Dean, they can certainly be the rotational pieces on that outside, and it wouldn't surprise me if they are. So, it's not always who starts. The old saying goes, it's who finishes, and we'll see who's on the field in the fourth quarter when the Eagles need to make a stop to win a game, whether it's going to be Bond or Dean. And I think that's going to be a feel thing for Fangio as the game goes on. He's going to go with who's ever hot. We've heard Sirianni say that with his running back. So I'm going to ride who's ever hot. And then he never does. He'll give it to Sanders or Swift or this year Barkley. But, I think that's going to be the case at linebacker. I think Dean can really help this team. And I think Jalen Hunt, I'm with you on that. I mean, I thought the same thing as you did, is he's going to be a guy that's going to be inactive on game day, a guy that's going to develop and, kind of marinate, if you will, on this team. And he's come out and he's shown that, he could have a role going forward. Now, he's got this oblique injury, Phil, that's a little concerning, as does Dallas Goedert. These oblique things in baseball, we see it with players. They get them and they end up missing, I don't know, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it is. So you hope that they can come back from this and, be ready for week 1.
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking with Ed Kracz, SI.com, Eagles beat reporter. Real quick, as we wrap this up, the vibes are, like I said at the very beginning, the vibes are a lot different, and the tone is very different. You've got Nick Sirianni in that CEO type role. You got Vic Fangio, like you've mentioned multiple times, old school, tough guy. You got Kellen Moore and his new offense. Do you think that this new coaching structure, gut feeling, you've been covering football and watching football for a very long time, do you think this new coaching structure is going to be able to sustain this year and things are going to definitely have a more positive outlook than last year's unfortunate ending?
Yeah, I do. I think they have, these coaches you mentioned, Kellen Moore, who I think is going to do a really good job with this offense, and Vic Fangio, of course. I think these guys they've done it. They know how to do it. I think players respect them. Even Doug Nussmeier, the quarterback coach, Kellen Moore's kind of right-hand man as Kellen Moore has grown in the coaching ranks. I think they're going to get a lot from these players. I like the DB coach, Christian Parker. I mean, these are guys that have all done it. Last year, the staff, we don't need to rehash it too much, but, Sean Desai had only been a coordinator for 1 season. Brian Johnson was new as an OC. So, there wasn't a lot of experience in the room, and I think that showed. But now you have it. I think it's really going to help, and I think it's going to sustain itself as the Eagles go through this season. Now, I'll say I hope the Eagles don't get off to like some 7-0 start and the pressure starts to build. I'd like to see, kind of a more, kind of a building type of a start. You win a game, lose a game, you start building towards where you can kind of hit your stride later in the season. And that might be what we see here with the new coordinators, with the new offense. It might take a little bit of time to grow. The new defense, obviously, with Fangio, trying to identify his personnel groupings and what kind of packages he can put in. So I think that part of the game is in good hands with the coaching staff, but I think it might take a little bit of time to grow together.
Taking a little bit. We don't have much time. I mean, a week from tomorrow is the first game.
Yeah.
Are you going down to Brazil? Do you got your passport ready to be stamped?
No, thank goodness. I don't. I've heard a lot of horror stories about the media shuttle and this and that. So, but no, I'm not going. I'm gonna sit this one out, and can't say I'm disappointed about that.
And that's crazy because who did I have on last? I don't remember if it was Chris Franklin or Martin Frank, and they were excited to go to Brazil. Yeah. And you're not so excited about a trip to Brazil.
No. Listen, I have to go to Japan later this year for my son's wedding ceremony. So, that's a 14-hour plane ride, and Brazil's probably 12 hours. So I don't need that in my life, as he's too long.
Anything over a 3-hour flight, and I'm freaking out. So
yeah,
I don't need any of that.
Right.
Real quick, we always end every interview, and I would get crushed by my regular listeners if I didn't ask it. Before we sign off with you here today, and I greatly appreciate your time this morning. You can only watch one movie for the rest of your life, and the people always need to know. It has to be either Goodfellas or Godfather. Which one you picking? But also, do not say you haven't watched The Godfather ever, like my last guest last week had said.
I don't know who said that, but every time it's on, like if I'm, channel surfing and it comes on, I put the remote down and I tune in, Godfather 1, Godfather 2, to me, great movies. Goodfellas to me has its moments. I think might be a little bit slower in parts. And, I don't mean to sound sacrilege when I say that. It's a great movie. But I would put Godfather above Goodfellas.
There you go. I greatly appreciate your time this morning. Hopefully we have a great season. Hopefully we can get you back on throughout the season. But, continue putting out the great work there. Guys, make sure you're following Ed. And reading all his work over there on SI.com. He does a fantastic job. One of the top guys that covers this team on a daily basis. Ed, thank you very much for your time this morning, and good luck on the season this year.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Phil. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Ed. That was Ed Kracz right there, SI.com. Guys, we got lots of comments to catch up on here. I will get to them all in a second. I will literally not stop till we get caught up on comments. But real quick, I got to fire through some sponsorships as well, because having great guests like Ed Kracz and putting off this show, you got to have great sponsors. ShuriTickets.com. No hidden fees. Price you see is the price you pay. They are the best. Family owned and operated since 1946. ShuriTickets.com provides you the place to get all your sports tickets, concert tickets, theater tickets. Check them out. Great prices. But if you use promo code EOP10 at checkout, check this out. You'll get 10% off those already great prices. So go to ShuriTickets.com. Don't overpay with the rest. Stay with the best. ShuriTickets.com. And of course, PhillySportsTrips.com. The Brazil trip is sold out. It's too late to book the Brazil trip. But you know what? You still want to check them out because you go to their website, you sign up, you mention EOP, and they got so many other great Eagles trips you can go on. Tampa Bay, a bus trip up to New York to see the Meadowlands, see the Eagles, and Saquon's return to New York. The bus trip to Baltimore, where you'll be filmed for the horror movie of the century. Dallas Takeover Week in November. PhillySportsTrips.com. Check them out. We're trying to get Vince on the show next week to talk about the trip to Brazil, or not next week, the following week, to talk about the trip to Brazil. He's the owner of PhillySportsTrips.com, but stay tuned for that, guys.